At 7:42 p.m., my younger brother sent one text that changed our family forever. I found my dream car. Meet me at the dealership tomorrow. You're co-signing. I replied with one sentence.
No.
Buy it yourself. 10 minutes later, my mother called, saying if I refused, I wasn't welcome at another family gathering. They thought they were forcing me into another sacrifice. What they didn't know was that my name was still attached to one financial account they completely forgot about. At 8:15 the next morning, one phone call for me froze everything. By 8:40 a.m., my phone had 63 missed calls. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my younger brother, Ryan, never heard the word no. Growing up, my parents called him their little miracle. I was simply the responsible one. If Ryan forgot his homework, I was expected to drive it to school. If he crashed his first car, I was told to help pay for the repairs. If he maxed out his credit cards in college, my parents said, he's still learning. Family helps family. Somehow, family always meant me. By the time I turned 30, I'd stopped arguing. I focused on building my own life instead. I worked as a senior financial analyst for a healthcare company, lived below my means, invested every bonus, and avoided debt whenever possible. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something Ryan never seemed interested in earning: peace of mind. Ryan, on the other hand, bounced from one idea to the next. One year, he wanted to open a gym. The next year, it was cryptocurrency. Then came an online clothing business that disappeared before the website was even finished. Every failure somehow became someone else's responsibility, mostly mine. Over the years, I'd loaned him money more times than I cared to count. $3,000 for overdue rent, $5,000 to save his business. Several credit card payments my parents promised he'd repay. He never did. Whenever I mentioned repayment, my mother would smile and say the same sentence she'd repeated for years. You're doing better than he is. Don't keep score with your own brother. Eventually, I stopped expecting the money back. I just stopped giving it. Apparently, Ryan never noticed the difference. Everything came to a head during my father's 65th birthday dinner. The entire family had gathered at my parents' house. Halfway through dessert, Ryan stood up with a grin so wide it looked rehearsed. I've got exciting news, he announced. Everyone looked at him. I found the perfect SUV. Dad clapped immediately. Mom looked ready to cry from happiness. That's wonderful, she said. Ryan pulled out his phone and started showing everyone glossy photos of a brand new luxury SUV. It's only $92,000, he said casually. I nearly laughed into my coffee. Only $92,000. Then he looked directly at me. The dealership already approved everything. Congratulations, I said. He smiled. There's just one tiny thing. I already knew where this was going. My credit score isn't high enough by itself. Silence settled over the table. Ryan leaned back in his chair like the conversation had already been decided. So you'll co-sign. Not would you? Not could you help? Just you'll co-sign. I set my coffee cup down carefully.
No.
The room froze. Ryan blinked.
What?
I said no. His smile disappeared. Come on, Emily.
No.
Dad cleared his throat. It's just paperwork. It becomes my debt if he doesn't pay. Ryan rolled his eyes dramatically. I'm going to pay. I couldn't stop myself. You've said that every other time. His face tightened. Mom immediately stepped in. Emily, this is different.
How?
This is his future. I looked around the table. My future mattered too when I paid his rent. Nobody answered. My future mattered when I covered his credit cards. Still nothing. My future mattered when I emptied part of my savings to help his business. Ryan folded his arms. So, you're seriously refusing? Yes. Mom's expression hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. If you won't help your own brother. She paused long enough for everyone to look at me. Then don't expect another invitation to family holidays. The words landed harder than I expected. Not because they hurt. Because they confirmed something I'd quietly suspected for years. My place in this family had never depended on love. It depended on what I was willing to provide. I stood, picked up my purse, wished my father a happy birthday, and walked out without another word. That night, while everyone assumed I'd eventually given, I logged into an old financial account they had completely forgotten still connected us all. I didn't cry after leaving my parents' house. I didn't call my best friend. I didn't type out angry messages I'd later regret. Instead, I drove home, changed into sweatpants, poured myself a cup of tea, and opened my laptop. When emotions run high, I trust paperwork more than people. Years earlier, after Ryan's second business failed, my parents had convinced me to help establish a shared family credit line. The idea sounded reasonable at the time. My father wanted a financial safety net for unexpected emergencies, and because my credit score was excellent, the bank approved a much larger limit than they would have received on their own. Dad had promised, "We'll remove your name after a year." A year became 2. 2 became 5. Eventually, everyone stopped mentioning it, including me. I logged into the online banking portal using credentials I'd saved years ago. To my surprise, the account was still active. More importantly, my name was still listed as a responsible party. I stared at the screen for several seconds. I honestly couldn't believe they had never updated it. Curious, I downloaded the last 2 years of statements. At first, everything looked ordinary. Monthly payments, interest charges, routine activity. Then patterns started appearing. Large purchases at electronic stores, high-end furniture, vacation bookings, expensive restaurant bills, custom automotive shops. None of those purchases looked like emergencies. I compared the dates with memories I already had. Ryan's work conference in Florida, the expensive television he proudly showed off last Christmas, the gaming setup he claimed he'd bought with a bonus, the upgraded wheels on his current truck. Every story suddenly fit together. The credit line had quietly become his backup wallet. Whenever money ran short, someone simply used the account I'd helped secure years earlier. I leaned back in my chair. It wasn't even the spending that bothered me most. It was the assumption. Nobody had asked whether I was still comfortable carrying the responsibility. Nobody had remembered the promise to remove my name. They had simply assumed I'd always be there. Always available. Always responsible. Always convenient. I opened the original agreement. There it was. My signature. Dad's signature. Mom's signature. The bank's approval. Everything was perfectly legal, which also meant I had every legal right to remove myself. Before doing anything, I slept on it. By morning, my answer hadn't changed. I called the bank shortly after opening hours. After verifying my identity, I explained the situation. I'd like to be removed from a shared credit line that still lists me as a responsible borrower. The representative reviewed the account. "I can see you're still listed, Miss Carter." "I shouldn't be." "There will be paperwork, but yes, we can process your request." "What happens after that?" "The remaining account holders will need to qualify without your financial profile. If they don't, the credit line may be reduced, suspended, or closed depending on the final review." I closed my eyes for a moment. "I understand." The representative asked one final question. "Are you certain you'd like to proceed?" For years, I'd answered everyone else's problems with yes. This time, my answer came easily. Yes. She thanked me and confirmed the request had officially entered processing. The call lasted less than 12 minutes. That was it. No arguments. No dramatic speeches. No revenge. Just one legal decision correcting something that should have been fixed years earlier. For the first time in a long while, I felt strangely calm. That evening, I cooked dinner, watched half a movie, and went to bed earlier than usual. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Ryan was probably dreaming about driving his brand new SUV home the next morning. He had no idea the paperwork he'd taken for granted was quietly changing overnight. At exactly 8:15 a.m., my phone exploded with calls. I woke up to my phone vibrating across the nightstand. At first, I ignored it. Then it buzzed again.
And again.
By the time I reached for it, the screen looked like it had gone into panic mode. 23 missed calls. 9 text messages, 3 voicemails, all within 15 minutes. Every notification came from the same 3 people. Ryan.
Mom. Dad.
I didn't answer. Instead, I got out of bed, made coffee, and let the phone keep ringing. After years of being expected to solve everyone else's emergencies, I wasn't about to sprint toward another one. When I finally sat down with my mug, the missed call count had climbed to 41. The newest text was from Ryan. "What did you do?" A second later, another one appeared. "The dealership says the application changed." Then another. "Answer your phone." I calmly took my first sip of coffee. 5 minutes later, my father texted, "Call us immediately. This is serious." A minute after that, my mother's message appeared. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." Harder? I almost laughed. No one had thought my life was hard when I spent years cleaning up Ryan's financial disasters. Now one legal decision had become a family emergency. At 8:37 a.m., my phone displayed 63 missed calls. I decided that was enough. I answered Ryan's next call. He didn't even say hello. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice echoed through the speakers so loudly, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "The dealership just called." "I know. You know." "They told me the financing couldn't move forward. They said the shared credit line changed overnight." It did. There was complete silence. Then, "You actually removed yourself?" "Yes." "Emily, are you serious?" "I've never been more serious." His breathing became heavier. "You ruined everything."
No.
"I've been waiting 3 months for this SUV. You should have waited until you qualified on your own. You knew I needed you." I looked out my apartment window at the quiet street below. "No, Ryan. I knew you expected me." Before he could answer, another voice suddenly joined the call.
Mom.
She must have been sitting beside him. Emily. Her tone had completely changed.
Soft.
Gentle. Almost pleading. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us you were thinking about doing this?" "I did." "When?" "5 years ago." Silence. I reminded everyone my name was still on that account. Nobody said anything. I was promised it would be removed. More silence. Dad finally spoke. "We honestly forgot." "I know." Ryan exploded again. "Well, congratulations. The bank says I don't qualify anymore." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Sorry? You embarrass me in front of everyone." "I didn't embarrass you. The bank did exactly what banks are supposed to do." Mom sighed heavily. "There has to be a way to reverse this." "There isn't. You could call them back." "I already signed the paperwork." Dad cleared his throat. "Emily." "Yes. We were counting on your credit." There it was. Not trust. Not love. Not respect. My credit. The thing they valued most about me wasn't my company. It wasn't my support. It wasn't the years I'd spent helping this family. It was 3 digits attached to my financial history. I felt strangely peaceful. I spent years trying to help all of you build your own stability. Nobody answered. I can't spend the rest of my life borrowing responsibility for people who refuse to carry their own. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Then he snapped. "So that's it?" "Yes." "You'd choose money over family?" I took one slow breath before answering.
No.
I finally chose myself. I ended the call. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the name of a law office I had never seen before. I answered the unfamiliar number expecting a sales call. Instead, a calm voice introduced himself. "Good morning, Miss Carter. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm an attorney with Brooks and Wallace." My stomach tightened. "I believe your parents' financial advisor suggested you speak with us." I wasn't expecting a lawyer. "I imagine not." His tone remained professional. "I'm calling because your recent removal from the shared credit line uncovered several financial documents that still reference your name." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of documents?" "There are no legal problems involving you." I exhaled. "However," he continued, "there are several pending financial applications that assumed your credit profile would remain connected." Applications. Future refinancing paperwork, a planned home equity adjustment, and documentation related to your brother's vehicle financing. I closed my eyes. They never told me. It appears they expected your continued participation. Expected. That word again.
No one had asked.
No one had explained. They had simply built future plans around my financial reputation as though it belonged to everyone. Mr. Brooks continued, "If you choose not to participate, you're completely within your rights." "I won't. I'll make a note of that." The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Not because my family was struggling, because I finally understood how deeply they depended on me without ever admitting it. Around lunchtime, my phone rang again.
Mom.
This time, I answered. "Emily." She sounded exhausted. "We'd like to meet." "Why?" "So we can talk. We've been talking for years. This time we'll listen." I almost declined. Instead, curiosity won. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the following afternoon. I arrived first. A few minutes later, my parents walked in with Ryan behind them. For the first time in my life, my younger brother looked nervous. Nobody spoke while we ordered coffee. The silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Dad finally cleared his throat. "We made mistakes." I nodded. "Yes." Mom reached across the table. "We should have removed your name years ago." "You should have." Ryan stared into his coffee. "I'm sorry." It was the first apology I'd ever heard from him, but something felt incomplete. I waited. "Sure enough," he continued, "I really need that car." There it was. Not an apology, a negotiation. Mom quickly added, "If you could just help one last time." I couldn't help smiling. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. One last time. I'd heard those words after his first credit card, after his apartment, after his business, after every financial mistake he'd ever made. There was always one more emergency, one more favor, one more promise that things would be different. I looked at each of them before asking a single question. If I'd signed those papers at the dealership, I paused. "Would any of you have thanked me?" Nobody answered. Ryan looked down. Dad rubbed the edge of his coffee cup. Mom blinked rapidly, but said nothing. That silence told me everything. Helping had become an expectation, not a gift, not a sacrifice, simply my assigned role in the family. I stood and reached for my purse. "Emily," Mom whispered, "please don't leave like this." I smiled politely. "I'm not leaving. I already left years ago. I just didn't realize it until now." I paid for my own coffee, walked calmly toward the door, and stepped into the afternoon sunshine feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my apartment. The return address made my heart skip a beat. It was from the bank. I set the envelope on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a few seconds. Certified mail usually meant one of two things: very good news or very bad news. After everything that had happened that week, I honestly wasn't sure which one I expected. I opened it carefully. Inside was a formal letter from the bank. My request had been fully processed. Effective immediately, my name had been removed from the shared credit line. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. For years, I'd carried responsibility that was never truly mine. Now it was officially over. I folded the letter, placed it back inside the envelope, and felt a weight disappear that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. That afternoon, I decided to finish what I'd started. I met with my financial advisor. We reviewed every account connected to my name, emergency contacts, beneficiaries, old authorizations, insurance records, anything that still linked my finances to someone else's decisions. By the end of the meeting, everything reflected the life I actually wanted. Simple,
Clear.
independent. A week later, my father called. His voice sounded older somehow. "I just wanted you to know." He hesitated. "Ryan bought a different car."
Oh.
"It isn't new. It doesn't have every feature he wanted, but it's something he could actually qualify for on his own." I smiled. "That's good." There was another long silence. Then Dad quietly admitted something I never thought I'd hear. "You were right." I didn't answer immediately. He continued, "We spent years protecting him from consequences. And, without realizing it, we made you carry them instead." The words hung between us. For For the first time, I believed he truly understood. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. So do I. He cleared his throat. I hope someday you'll come back for dinner. I will. But only if I'm invited because I'm your daughter. Not because I'm your credit score. He gave a quiet laugh. I think we've finally learned the difference. Months passed. Life became surprisingly peaceful. Without constant financial emergencies, I finally had room to focus on myself. I started traveling on weekends, joined a hiking group, finished renovating the small townhouse I'd purchased years earlier but never had time to enjoy. For the first time in a long while, my future felt like it actually belonged to me. That Thanksgiving, I accepted my parents' invitation. Dinner felt different. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody hinted about loans. Nobody slid paperwork across the table. Halfway through dessert, Ryan cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. I owe you an apology. I waited quietly. I spent years believing someone else would always fix my mistakes. He looked directly at me. When you said no, I thought you were trying to hurt me. He smiled awkwardly. But you actually forced me to grow up. I nodded. I'm glad you figured that out. He raised his coffee mug. To new beginnings. Everyone quietly lifted their glasses. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No perfect ending. Just something better. Honesty. As I drove home that night, I realized something that had taken me 34 years to understand. Setting a boundary doesn't destroy a family. It reveals whether the relationship was built on love or on obligation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do isn't rescuing someone from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes it's stepping aside long enough for them to become responsible for their own life. And looking back now, I don't remember the SUV Ryan never bought. I remember the day I finally stopped paying the price for someone else's decisions. That was the morning everything truly changed.